There is something you need to pay attention to today, because a thought you assumed was finished may be returning for a reason. Perhaps an old project suddenly crossed your mind after months of silence, or a plan you abandoned without completely forgetting. It appeared again in the middle of an ordinary moment. It may have happened while you were making breakfast, getting ready for work, driving somewhere, or simply standing still with nothing particular on your mind. There may have been no dramatic revelation at all, only a quiet interruption in your usual thinking, a sudden sense that perhaps you gave up on that idea too quickly, or perhaps the situation you have been trying to solve has another answer you have never seriously considered. Those moments can seem insignificant because they do not arrive with urgency, but today they deserve your attention. Today is August 23rd, 2026, and the moon has entered Aquarius while the sun remains in Virgo, creating a fascinating meeting between two very different approaches to life. Virgo is concerned with organization, routines, precision, improvement, and the careful maintenance of what already exists. Aquarius brings experimentation, originality, independence, and the willingness to step outside the familiar framework altogether. When these energies appear together, something important becomes possible. You are not being asked simply to improve the method you already use. You are being given an opportunity to question the method itself. This distinction matters more than it may seem, especially if you have been feeling as though you are putting effort into your life without feeling genuinely engaged by the results. Aquarius asks you to look at the structure from outside of it, while Virgo helps you determine whether the alternative you discover can actually function in real life. This is where the combination becomes unusually productive. Aquarius by itself can produce brilliant possibilities that remain theoretical because the difficult work of implementation never follows. Virgo by itself can become so committed to adjustment and refinement that it forgets to ask whether the original structure still deserves to exist. Today, however, one energy can compensate for the limitation of the other. The moon is particularly important because its movement creates the changing emotional and mental atmosphere of individual days. It circles Earth in roughly 27 days, passing through all 12 zodiac signs during that cycle and remaining in each sign for approximately 2.5 days. Because it moves so quickly compared with slower planets, its influence can feel immediate, personal, and noticeably different from one day to the next. The sun describes the broader season of your experience, but the moon speaks more directly to the emotional and psychological character of a particular day. That is why today's atmosphere is especially supportive of taking something familiar and looking at it from an entirely different angle. Instead of asking yourself how you can make an existing routine slightly more efficient, consider asking whether the routine itself is still the right one. Instead of automatically searching for another small adjustment, give yourself permission to imagine a completely different structure. That kind of thinking can feel surprisingly difficult on ordinary days, because the human mind naturally prefers familiar frameworks. Your brain saves energy by modifying what it already understands, instead of constantly creating and testing new systems from nothing. That tendency is not a personal failure, and it does not mean you lack creativity. It is simply an efficient mental habit. Yet Aquarius energy can make the distance between the familiar and the unconventional feel smaller, allowing an unusual possibility to enter your awareness without immediately being rejected. This opportunity is temporary because the moon will move onward tomorrow into Pisces, bringing a quieter and more emotionally receptive atmosphere. So if there is a system, routine, project, or approach you have repeatedly told yourself you should reconsider someday, today is a particularly useful day to actually examine it. There is also an ancient image associated with Aquarius that reveals something essential about this energy. The water-bearer is portrayed carrying a vessel whose contents are poured outward for the benefit of others. The image is not centered on possession. It is centered on distribution, contribution, and the idea that what is valuable becomes more meaningful when it can serve something larger than the individual. That symbolism helps explain why today's insights may become stronger through conversation rather than isolation. An idea can change dramatically when another person questions it, adds something you did not see, or approaches the same problem from an entirely different direction. If you have a meeting, a collaborative task, or even a casual conversation with someone whose perspective challenges your own, resist the temptation to make the interaction comfortable simply for the sake of agreement. Today, respectful disagreement can be productive. Two people seeing the same problem differently may discover an option that neither would have reached independently. This is also a meaningful day for friendships, based on intellectual connection. Some people enter your life primarily to comfort you, while others expand your mind, challenge your assumptions, and leave you seeing familiar subjects differently. Both forms of connection matter, but Aquarius especially supports those relationships where curiosity and mutual respect create genuine mental movement. If someone comes to mind today because conversations with that person consistently make you think in new ways, reaching out may be more valuable than you realize. At the same time, there is a boundary you should remember. Aquarius can sometimes become attracted to difference simply because difference feels exciting. Rejecting an established method does not automatically make the replacement superior. Being unconventional is not the same thing as being useful. This is precisely where Virgo becomes important. Virgo can examine the exciting new possibility and ask the practical question, does this actually work? Let Aquarius generate the possibility without immediately restricting it. Then let Virgo test it without killing it through excessive criticism. The goal is not change for the sake of change. The goal is meaningful improvement through a willingness to reconsider what you previously accepted without question. This becomes even more important when several people are involved, because group enthusiasm can sometimes make disruption feel valuable simply because everyone is excited about challenging the old way. If a conversation becomes filled with enthusiasm about abandoning an existing approach, take a moment to separate genuine improvement from the thrill of rebellion. Ask whether the proposed alternative truly solves the problem better, or whether everyone is simply enjoying the feeling of questioning something familiar. And if you have personally felt trapped in repetition lately, moving through the same routine while feeling less and less connected to it, do not dismiss today's mental interruptions. That forgotten idea may be showing you where your curiosity still exists. Before this day ends, sit quietly with one question. What is one system in my life that technically functions, but no longer truly supports the person I am becoming? And if I stopped assuming the old method was the only option, what completely different approach might I discover? The answer does not need to arrive immediately, but allowing yourself to ask the question is already the beginning of the shift, and that shift leads naturally into what comes next. You do not have to turn every realization into an immediate action, because sometimes the most important change begins simply by allowing yourself to see another possibility without rejecting it. When you give your mind permission to imagine a different route, an old pattern can begin losing its grip even before you make a single external decision. That is an important part of today's energy, because this Aquarius moon will not affect every sign in exactly the same way. Aquarius stands closest to this lunar influence. And if you were born under Aquarius, you may feel the mental shift more directly than most. Something inside you may be becoming increasingly unwilling to repeat routines that have lost their meaning. What once felt acceptable may suddenly feel too predictable, too restrictive, or simply disconnected from who you are now. Do not automatically label that feeling as distraction or impatience. There can be information inside that restlessness. Your curiosity may be reminding you that your individuality deserves room to breathe. You may also become unusually aware of your place within groups, communities, friendships, or collaborative environments. Pay attention to where you feel welcomed as yourself where you sense an unspoken expectation to become smaller, quieter, or more agreeable in order to belong. You do not need to make a dramatic decision about those relationships today. Simply recognize what becomes visible, because awareness can come before action. Leo experiences today's moon from a more challenging position, and this can create tension between your desire for personal expression and Aquarian preference for shared participation. You may be accustomed to stepping forward, making your contribution visible, and allowing your individuality to shape the direction of a situation. Yet a group project or shared conversation may ask you to distribute recognition rather than hold the central position. Notice if that creates resistance inside you. It does not mean your voice matters less. It may simply reveal that some of the strongest results are created when several people contribute without one person needing to dominate the entire process. Your recent Leo season emphasized visibility, courage, and authentic self-expression, and that development remains important. Today's lesson adds another dimension. Can you remain completely yourself while working inside a structure where other people also have space to shine? You are not being asked to reduce your presence. You are discovering that your presence does not become weaker when it exists beside another person's light. Taurus encounters another challenging relationship with today's Aquarius moon, because your natural desire for consistency may resist the disruption Aquarius introduces. If a conversation or situation makes you reconsider something you believed was already settled, you may initially experience that reconsideration as unnecessary discomfort. But questioning does not automatically mean destroying. You can inspect a structure without tearing it down. You can ask whether a routine still serves you, and then consciously decide that it should remain. There is a major difference between choosing stability and simply remaining inside something because you have never questioned it. For Taurus, that distinction can become especially valuable today. Stability becomes stronger when you know why you are keeping something, rather than maintaining it only because it is familiar. Gemini and Libra may find this atmosphere much more natural, because both are air signs like Aquarius. For you, intellectual movement can feel energizing rather than threatening. Conversations may open doors quickly. Ideas may connect with unusual ease, and meeting someone with a different perspective may become one of the most stimulating experiences of the day. Do not limit yourself to people who always confirm what you already believe. Seek out someone who sees the subject differently. Gemini can bring curiosity into the exchange, while Libra can help hold space for disagreement without immediately turning it into conflict. The most meaningful conversation may be the one that challenges you without disrespecting you. For the remaining 7 signs, the Aquarius influence may be less concentrated, but it is still present. Aries can use natural courage to suggest an unconventional possibility that might normally remain unspoken. Cancer may discover that familiar home routines can function differently, with even a small adjustment to the arrangement of a space. Virgo, while continuing through your own season, receives a useful counterweight from the Aquarius moon, encouraging you to examine the architecture of a system instead of only perfecting its individual parts. Scorpio can approach an issue that has received deep attention from a completely new psychological angle, potentially revealing something that was difficult to see through the previous perspective. Sagittarius receives additional support for broad vision and expansive planning, making it easier to consider possibilities beyond cautious incremental progress. Capricorn may find that an established structure becomes more effective after one genuinely original idea is introduced, even if the final conclusion is that the existing method remains the best choice. Pisces can experience an interesting meeting between intuition and innovation, allowing an inspired thought to develop into something that feels surprisingly practical, rather than remaining only an abstract impression. Taken together, today's energy continues a larger story that has been unfolding through this remarkable month. Yesterday, the Sun entered Virgo and began emphasizing the need to organize, sort, refine, and bring greater order to what the eclipse period exposed. Today, the Aquarius moon adds an essential question to that process. Are you organizing the right system, or are you simply becoming more efficient at maintaining something that no longer deserves to operate in the same way? Refinement and innovation are not enemies. Virgo can test what Aquarius imagines, while Aquarius can prevent Virgo from becoming trapped inside endless improvement of an outdated structure. Each energy gives the other a necessary correction. There is also a much larger idea connected with Aquarius that extends far beyond the immediate movement of the moon. Some astrological traditions describe humanity as gradually moving toward what is known as the Age of Aquarius, a cycle lasting many thousands of years and associated with the extremely slow wobble of Earth's axis. This concept operates on an entirely different scale from the monthly movement of the moon and the yearly movement of the sun, so today's Aquarius moon should not be confused with that enormous historical cycle. Still, the symbolic connection is interesting. Aquarius is traditionally associated with collective innovation, technological development, networks, communities, shared ideals, and forms of connection that do not depend entirely upon traditional hierarchy. When you look at the modern world, digital communities, remote collaboration, rapidly moving information, and people forming connections across enormous distances, those themes can feel remarkably familiar. Whether someone interprets that resemblance as astrological influence or simply as cultural development, the correspondence is difficult to ignore as a symbolic reflection. Today's moon therefore offers a much smaller expression of a much larger Aquarian theme. For a brief period, the same questions that may exist on a generational scale become personal. How do you belong without abandoning individuality? How do you improve a system without becoming imprisoned by it? How do you share an idea without needing to possess it? And how do you remain open to innovation while still asking whether the change actually makes life better? That is the deeper thread running beneath today's astrology, and it prepares the ground for the next part of this unfolding story. If the new perspective appearing for you today has something to do with technology, do not dismiss it simply because it looks different from the methods you have used before. Aquarius has a natural relationship with changing tools, digital systems, new forms of communication, and unfamiliar ways of solving problems. So an idea involving a new tool or a different technological approach to an old difficulty fits naturally within the evolving expression of this sign across different eras. But the energy today reaches beyond technology itself. Aquarius is also deeply connected with collective innovation, meaning ideas become especially meaningful when they are used to benefit something larger than one individual. If you are participating in a non-profit effort, a community initiative, a shared project with friends, or a collaboration with co-workers that exists for a purpose beyond personal advantage, pay closer attention to the assumptions built into that work. There may be one part of the process everyone has accepted simply because that is how it has always been done. Today is an excellent moment to ask whether that assumption still serves the people the project is actually intended to help. Perhaps the solution is not to work harder, but to rethink the structure. Perhaps the group does not need more effort from everyone, but a different method altogether. And if no collective project currently exists in your life, this may be the moment to consider whether a small beginning could eventually become something useful to others. Aquarius often becomes most powerful when an original thought stops being private and begins becoming a contribution. Today's combination is particularly supportive of that transition because Aquarius supplies the willingness to imagine differently while Virgo provides the practical instinct needed to turn an idea into something functional. Instead of allowing another interesting thought to disappear into the background, you have an opportunity to give one idea enough structure to become real. There is a simple exercise that can help you do exactly that, and it does not require hours of planning. Give yourself 5 minutes and identify 3 systems in your life that currently operate almost entirely through habit. It could be a recurring task at work, a household responsibility, or a routine you perform so frequently that you rarely stop to examine it anymore. Once you have those 3 examples, do not immediately search for a small improvement. Instead, approach each one through the perspective of Aquarius. Ask yourself whether there is an entirely different method you have never seriously tested. Let the answers arrive without immediately criticizing them. Something may sound unrealistic at first. Another possibility may feel strangely simple. A third may seem almost too unconventional to consider. Write them down anyway. The Virgo part of this process comes later. Today, the first responsibility is not judging the idea. It is allowing the idea to exist long enough to be seen. If your mind feels too attached to the existing structure to generate anything truly different, create distance from it. Imagine that you are explaining the system to someone who comes from another historical period, another culture, or an entirely different environment. Imagine that person has no emotional investment in why you currently do things the way you do them. What would they find strange? What would they immediately ask you to explain? What would seem unnecessarily complicated to someone who has never been trained to accept the current arrangement as normal? Familiarity can make inefficient systems invisible because repetition gradually transforms a choice into something that feels like a fact. An outside perspective can break that illusion. This is also why doing the exercise with another person may produce even more interesting results today. Aquarius naturally appreciates collaborative intelligence, so if you have a friend, partner, or colleague available, explain one of your systems to them without defending it. Give them enough information to understand the basic structure, then allow them to question it from the outside. They may notice an alternative precisely because they do not carry your history with the system. People who work inside a structure for a long time often become experts at explaining why it exists, while outsiders can sometimes see immediately that another route was possible all along. Once you have found at least one genuinely different possibility, allow Virgo to enter the process. Do not assume that an idea is valuable merely because it is unusual. Ask whether the alternative actually addresses a problem that exists. Ask whether it would make the situation more effective, useful, or sustainable, rather than simply making it feel exciting. Then ask yourself an even more revealing question. If this idea were no longer new tomorrow, would you still want to use it? That question helps separate genuine innovation from temporary fascination. You are not trying to suppress the creative movement of Aquarius. You are giving it a practical destination. A useful idea is not merely something that sounds impressive, it is something that can survive contact with real life. This matters even more because today sits within a larger astrological transition that is already approaching. In 5 days, on the 28th, a partial lunar eclipse will occur in Pisces, bringing an extended cycle that has been unfolding since March of last year toward a significant closing point. Many astrologers have already described the period immediately surrounding this eclipse as unusually intense, with some referring to the days leading into it as Eclipse Intensity Week. In that context, today's Aquarius moon has a purpose that may be easy to overlook. It trains a mental skill you are likely to need as the eclipse approaches. The ability to look at circumstances from more than one angle without becoming trapped inside the first interpretation that appears. Eclipses can reveal information that changes your understanding of a situation. They can bring developments that require adjustment rather than resistance. They can expose something that was present all along, but remained outside your conscious awareness. When that happens, mental flexibility becomes extremely valuable. If you have already practiced asking whether another possibility exists, you are less likely to experience an unexpected revelation as something that completely destroys your sense of direction. Instead, you may be more capable of asking what the new information changes and what it does not change. The upcoming lunar eclipse is also a full moon, and that distinction matters. A full moon traditionally represents culmination, a point where something that has been developing reaches a more visible expression. When the full moon is also an eclipse, that process can become more pronounced, with hidden or incomplete information becoming easier to recognize. If something began quietly around the middle of February, when a corresponding new moon in this same sign pairing may have planted an early seed, the coming days could bring that story toward a much clearer stage of development. You may finally understand what a previous development was preparing you to see. There is another layer to this particular eclipse that some astrologers have emphasized. For certain people, it may represent the closing chapter of a financial story that has unfolded across nearly 8 years, ending a prolonged period characterized by restriction followed by expansion in this particular area of life. Whether that description applies directly to your own chart or not, the length of the cycle itself is worth considering. 5 days from now, something associated with a period lasting far longer than the approximately 2 weeks of eclipse season intensity experienced this month may reach a meaningful conclusion. This 8-year period connects back to Saturn's significant movement through the same area of the sky. A transit many people experience through themes of limitation, financial caution, discipline management, and, in some individual circumstances, genuine hardship. When a long period of restriction begins to loosen, the transition into greater ease does not always feel immediately comfortable. Someone who has spent years protecting every resource may continue expecting scarcity even after conditions begin improving. Someone who learned to survive through constant caution may struggle to trust expansion when it finally becomes possible. That adjustment can be just as important as the external change itself. If your financial circumstances have felt unusually constrained for reasons that never seemed completely understandable, this larger time frame may offer useful context for interpreting that experience. And the approaching eclipse may bring something more tangible than the emotional satisfaction of closing an old chapter. It may coincide with real relief in circumstances where the cycle has been especially relevant. Today, therefore, occupies an unusual position in the larger sequence. You are 5 days away from a significant closing, but you are not being asked to force the ending before it arrives. This is a transitional space, a period in which preparation can be more valuable than urgency. The flexible thinking encouraged by today's Aquarius moon may become useful once the 28th arrives and the eclipse asks for something more definite from you. If you want to approach these 5 days consciously, do not treat them as empty space between today and the eclipse. Think of them as a preparation period in which each day has its own purpose and atmosphere. Resist the temptation to mentally jump ahead simply because you know something significant is approaching. Today has its own assignment, opening your mind to alternatives, questioning assumptions, and allowing innovation to coexist with practical judgment. The days ahead will carry their own distinct qualities, and meeting each one as it arrives may prepare you far more effectively than spending the entire period waiting for the eclipse itself. Whatever returned to your mind today, whether it was an old plan you had forgotten about, or a different way of handling something you have been repeating without much thought, do not assume its value disappears simply because the moon changes signs tomorrow. A brief thought can become the first opening in a pattern that has been closed for far too long. You do not have to decide today whether the idea deserves a permanent place in your life. The important thing is to recognize that something inside your thinking has shifted enough for another possibility to become visible. Today's Aquarius moon may be temporary, but the perspective it creates can remain useful after the moon moves forward. Tomorrow, the moon enters Pisces, and the atmosphere changes noticeably from the analytical and inventive quality available today toward a more intuitive and emotionally receptive experience. That shift creates a natural second stage for whatever you discovered. Today is better suited to generating possibilities, while tomorrow may be better suited to quietly feeling your way through them. Once the excitement of discovering something new settles down, You may notice that not every idea carries the same emotional weight. Some thoughts sound impressive because they are unusual. Others continue returning because something deeper inside you recognizes them as meaningful. Aquarius can open the door to possibilities, while Pisces can help you sense which possibility carries genuine resonance after the mental noise becomes quieter. So if something important surfaced today, you do not need to force it into action immediately. Give it room to breathe and allow tomorrow's softer atmosphere to show you which thoughts still feel alive when novelty is no longer doing the convincing. Before closing this reflection, it is also worth stepping back and looking at the remarkable rhythm this month has created as a whole. The Lion's Gate brought one kind of opening. The eclipse introduced another level of change. Scorpio brought greater emotional depth. Sagittarius offered a sense of relief. Venus and Saturn confronted you with honesty. Virgo arrived with grounding and organization yesterday. And now Aquarius has introduced the possibility of thinking differently. Each day has carried its own distinct quality, instead of simply repeating the emotional atmosphere of the day before it. That variety is part of what has made this period so significant to follow. If you have been paying attention throughout this sequence, you may have developed something more useful than the ability to remember individual astrological predictions. You may have become more sensitive to the actual movement of your own inner world. Instead of moving through every day automatically, you may be catching the small changes in your reactions, your thoughts, your relationships, your energy, and the situations around you. That awareness may ultimately be more valuable than any individual forecast, because it teaches you how to observe your own life while it is happening. Today's Aquarius moon specifically highlights that skill by asking you to notice where habit has taken over and where curiosity can return. There is a larger lesson underneath everything we have explored today. No system remains perfectly suited to a changing life forever. A personal routine, a professional workflow, or a structure created for a community may once have worked extremely well, yet gradually become less appropriate as circumstances and people change. The difficulty is that this kind of mismatch usually develops quietly. There is rarely one dramatic moment when you suddenly realize that an old approach has expired. More often, the system becomes slightly less effective, then slightly more frustrating, then increasingly disconnected from what you actually need, while familiarity keeps you from questioning it. That is why days that encourage fresh perspective can be so valuable. They allow you to notice the drift before the distance between your actual life and your preferred life becomes much larger. And this principle does not stop with external routines. Your internal systems deserve the same examination. You carry beliefs about who you are, what you can handle, what you deserve, what kind of person you are allowed to become, and what you believe is possible for you. Some of those beliefs may have once been accurate. Others may have been formed during circumstances that no longer exist. Yet, because they have been repeated internally for so long, familiarity can make them feel like permanent truth. If today's atmosphere encourages you to reconsider anything, do not limit that examination to your calendar, your work, or your daily habits. Look inward as well. Ask yourself whether a belief about your own identity remains genuinely true, or whether it continues simply because you have carried it for so long that questioning it feels unnatural. That question can be uncomfortable because changing an external routine is often easier than challenging a belief that has become part of your self-image. But the same principle applies. Something being familiar does not automatically make it accurate. If you have followed today's energy closely, tell me which of the 5 signs discussed today felt most connected to your own experience. And tell me what specific system, routine, or pattern you now feel ready to reconsider. Your answer may also help someone else recognize a pattern they have been unable to name. And if these daily explanations help you understand the movement of your own life, instead of simply giving you another generic horoscope to read and forget, subscribe, and share this with someone who may be caught inside a routine that no longer serves them. Thank you for being here and for giving this time to yourself. There are 5 days remaining before the eclipse, and we will arrive at that moment together. Whatever changed inside you today, whether it was only a quiet thought or something much more significant, do not underestimate it. It belongs to the larger movement that has been unfolding throughout this extraordinary month. The deeper gift has not been any single prediction. It has been the practice of paying attention. When you pay attention, patterns become easier to recognize. When you remain present, subtle changes become visible before they become overwhelming. And when you learn to meet each day for what it actually brings, instead of rushing through it simply waiting for the next major event, you develop a kind of awareness that lasts far beyond any one lunar transit. That sustained attentiveness, built day after day, may be the most meaningful thing this entire sequence has offered you.